Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. You know, there's some debates out there that are still highly contested. Coke versus Pepsi. Coke. Jordan versus Magic. Jordan. Hulk versus Thing. Hulk. And while you would be wrong to go against the picks that I just gave you, you could at least make the argument. But there is one comparison that you can no longer make the argument for, and that, of course, is a comparison between CBCS and CGC. The debate is over. The case is closed. Because after this week's last premium heritage auction, we saw two copies sell back to back, with one of them going for 40% less value. And I think you know which one that was. And so in this video, we got to talk about that. But before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe, of course, I would appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. Now, if you guys happen to know, this past weekend, Heritage Auctions, of course, one of the premier auction houses, had one of their signature auctions. And they basically put together, you know, some of the really rare books, you know, the very, very high grade stuff, with some other stuff mixed in there. And this past weekend, they actually had a number of Ultimate Fallout 4 Djurjevic variants going up for sale. Now I have to apologize because I feel like Swaggle Comics and Games is all of a sudden becoming the Ultimate Fallout 4 news network. But at the same time, it feels like every relevant story has to do with Ultimate Fallout 4 as of late. So we have to talk about this comparison, and it just so happens that Ultimate Fallout 4 is the book in question. Now, for the longest time, people have said that CBCS, while it does command a little bit less of a value than that of CGC, there was always this emphasis on little, you know, being maybe a marginal percent or a 5%, maybe even a 10% margin, you know, in some rare occurrences. I mean, we've had conversations on this channel before about, you know, other books selling back to back. In fact, there was a back-to-back sale for an Incredible Hulk #1, I believe, at the 7.0 range that happened at the previous Heritage auction sale. And that was an instance where the CBCS book, you know, selling right after the CGC one, went for less money. Although even in that circumstance, I believe the value difference was around 5 to 10%. But here we are coming off of this auction. And as you guys can already see, I'm sure from the images on your screen, you see two back-to-back sales for this book in the CGC 9.8 and the CBCS 9.8. And what do you see that they sold for? Well, the CGC one selling for $27,600, which is actually a drop from the prior sales, which, you know, we can talk about that a little bit later on. And then you see the CBCS one selling for a measly $18,000 after that. $18,000 compared to $27,600. That is a drop of roughly 40% of value. That is a significant drop from the CGC sale. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, well, you know, you can't compare because you got to look at the books and you got to talk about the books, and maybe the CBCS one doesn't present as nice and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, that kind of is the point. You're kind of making my argument for me, because we actually have to talk about how when you buy a book that is a CBCS 9.8, you are susceptible to scrutiny that you wouldn't get with the CGC 9.8 grade. And that's one of the reasons why the CBCS one is going to be a lot harder to command the price next to the CGC one, because everyone is going to be questioning whether or not the CBCS book is actually a 9.8 grade, because you have to go to Thought Experiment Town and think to yourself, okay, if I was going to buy this CBCS 9.8 Djurjevic variant, and I probably won't crack it, but if I did crack it and send it over to CGC, do I think that I could actually hit a 9.8 grade? So then you're going to have all these people who are in here doing the Heritage auction scan detective work, going over this book, looking at it very, very, very closely, just like we are right here, and they're going to go over every little defect and detail that they can find. Now, there are some things that are going to be hard here, like you see what seems to be a color break right here on the cover, but that, I would assume, is something that is going on top of the case. So it isn't a perfect way to figure out, okay, you know, are there any additional damages on this book? But the point I'm making is that you're going to go in here and you're going to look and you're going to question the spine. And when you go down here and you see these two minor little spine ticks in the lower back corner, you're going to think to yourself, oh, well, hey, what if CGC comes down hard on this book? What if this book gets a 9.6? And you're going to start to wonder, I don't know if I feel comfortable spending 9.8 money on a book that is in a CBCS case. I mean, it doesn't help that also right here, it seems to be that there's a scratch on the case. That does kind of look like, a color break increase, but it probably isn't. I mean, there's no way that even CBCS would give this a 9.8 with a color break increase like that. So you have to assume that that's on the case. But I'm pointing out these spine ticks to show you that, when you go into the 9.8 CGC right here, you can also find little spine ticks. You see one right here, maybe here's like a half spine tick. And then there's some other damages, that if you go down here to the same back corner, you can actually see, okay, here's another little spine tick right there, just about an inch up and, a little bit of a rounded corner down here in the bottom. But because you are already in the CGC case, you are not going to have that same sort of scrutiny. No one is going to crack this open anymore. It's going to stay in this case until the day that this book dies. So no one has to worry about whether or not this is a true CGC 9.8. But in the case of the CBCS case, once you're in here, even if the buyer is never actually going to swap to CGC, they just want to know that if they did swap to CGC, would this book in fact get that 9.8 grade? And for that reason, you're always going to be taking on a little bit of a risk whenever you buy CBCS books. And that's really one of the reasons why, especially at this high of a value range, in the 5-figure range, well into the 5-figure range, people are a little bit hesitant to pay the fair market value for this book. And I got to say, this is a little bit concerning, a little bit damning if you are CBCS. I don't know how much time they worry about their fair market values selling on the secondary market in comparison to CGC. I'm sure for them, it's always been a little bit of the case where, hey, as long as we're within the ballpark, I think things are okay. But knowing that this is about 37%, I'm rounding up to 40%, but around that level range of a difference, that is concerning, specifically because it is on a modern book like this. Now, I've heard people say that, CBCS is not worried so much about the vintage market because, if you have an Action 1 or you got an old, Superman 1 or Batman 1 or whatever the case is, you're going to send it to CGC. It's going to be really hard for CBCS to ever gain market share on the vintage comic book market. CGC just has that on lock. So CBCS, where they see an opportunity, is to capture the modern market with books like Ultimate Fallout 4 and, even new comic books and things like that. But if even in the modern market with this Drujevich variant, you're seeing this big of a difference, well, it sort of begs the question, why would anyone want to send to CBCS outside of just having the case itself? And the sentiment in the market seems to be already that the label of CBCS is aesthetically not that pleasing. So if you're just sending your books to CBCS just to house it in a case, I mean, you might as well just house it in the CGC one, even if it is just for aesthetic purposes, because nobody likes this label. So a lot of problems going on with CBCS right now. And I think now that we're starting to see much more clear examples, especially high profile examples of value difference between these books, I think that this is very, very concerning for CBCS fans and CBCS holders. And I have to wonder how they can pivot from here or what they can do to sort of turn the tide, so to speak. Now, in the bull market, I think when everything is selling and there's just massive FOMO all over the place, people are just going to buy whatever they can have the opportunity to buy. So if CBCS is the only book or case that is available to you, people are just going to buy it no matter what. But now in the bear market, where people are being a little more choosy with their purchases, CBCS books are really, really going to suffer. And I think we just saw it here in these back-to-back sales. Now, there is something interesting here because, as I kind of already clicked into it, there was also a CGC 9.6 book that sold at the same auction for $7,200. So there is an interesting sort of breaking point if you're somebody who is obsessed with this book and you have a lot of money to spend. I suppose if you're thinking, hey, well, what's the worst that could happen? I buy this CBCS book for $18,000. I send it to CGC. Maybe it comes back at 9.6. How much do I lose? Well, I lose about $10,000, which is definitely not ideal. But at the same time, if you buy this for $18,000 in the CBCS case and you send it to CGC, and then you have the opportunity to actually make $10,000, then maybe the CBCS case was the really good purchase, So it's definitely high risk, high reward. And there's probably a breaking point, if I'm not a mathematician, but I think if you, let's say that you buy, say, 6 of them, it's not that you're going to be able to really buy 6 of them all the way. Oh, well, you could, if you wait for enough auctions. But if you buy around 6 of them and 3 come back, let's say you have a 50% chance, right? 3 of them come back CGC 9.8s and 3 of them come back CGC 9.6s. Well, I think at that 6 issue range, you're going to be making your money. There's a certain breaking point where the risk is actually worth it if you want to play with, $100,000 of, comic book money, which again, not many people actually want to do that. Now, before I wrap up the video, I did kind of want to just finish out talking about this Ultimate Fallout 4 book, the value range here. There was also this other one that went up for auction, the 9.8 that had this remark on it, signed by Bendis, remarked by Clayton Crane, remarked by Mark Bagley. Kind of an interesting book. This one did sell for around the $33,000 range, which is comparable to that of, some of the other big books that, or some of the other sales for this book. Although this book has definitely been on the slide. And, you can make the argument that the reason why this didn't sell as high is due to the fact that, how many people are going to like this remark? I mean, while it's not a bad remark, I would say, some people just want the artwork to not be, inhibited by people drawing over top of it. So a much more selective buyer in this situation. But interesting to see that this book has been correcting as much as it has been. I mean, here is the 9.6 chart. You can see that, like every other book, we're starting to feel the pullbacks. And even here at the 9.8 level, this was bound to happen, where we do start to see, some of these pullbacks for this book. This $27,000 sale, although, nothing to sneeze at, is the lowest sale we've seen for this book since the initial jump back in early 2021, when a 9.8 sold for $12,000 and then all of a sudden jumped up to $31,000. So the $27,000 is, the starting to show weakness in the value range for this sale. It's interesting to think about where this book would be. I've always made mention here on the channel that, remember, in August of 2020, this was an $8,000 book. If you're somebody out there who bought this book at that $8,000 level, or hell, even if you bought this book at $3,000 or $2,000, a year before that, I mean, how could you not be incentivized to take these gains right now? If you bought this book for $2,000 and you can sell it for $27,000, I mean, 10x profit. I mean, that'd be hard to give up. So this one is interesting and concerning to think about where this book continues to go down from here. If in fact it continues to go down, which, in my opinion, based on 180 pop count at the CGC 9.8 level, and if we're starting to see a little bit of weakness in the value range, I do think that it is very likely that the book can continue to dip a little bit as we get into Q3 and Q4, because it's feeling like this book is going up for sale at least once a month or every couple, big auctions or so. But very interesting story here, very interesting sale, back-to-back CGC and CBCS. It is feeling like the debate between these two companies is officially over. As many faults as CGC has, they are winning from a customer service standpoint. They are winning from an aesthetic standpoint, even though that is subjective, but I would say that most people like the aesthetics of CGC more. And they are now clearly winning from a value range, which even before the sale was slightly debated. But let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about this sale difference? What do you guys think about the value range? I mean, if you're somebody out there who is slabbing your books, even if you're not necessarily looking to flip them, how could you not be incentivized to go with a company that is going to command more secondary market value? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. What do you guys think about this? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. See you all in the next video.